Arya spent hours watching a movie on Netflix, but her mind kept wandering back to Alexander, constantly checking the time as if willing it to move faster. Eventually, she couldn't sit still any longer and got up from the couch, pacing the room in frustration. Despite the late hour, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, a restlessness gnawed at her, making her feel stretched thin. She couldn't shake the memory of how close and attractive Alexander had been earlier, contrasting sharply with his sudden change in demeanor after lunch. Frustrated and confused, Arya tried to push thoughts of Alexander aside, reminding herself that he was the least of her worries. Yet his abrupt departure from the nightclub lingered in her mind, especially given their recent marriage. Sitting back down on the couch, Arya realized that Alexander wasn't joking when he said she shouldn't wait for him to come home that night. With a heavy sigh, she acknowledged that there was no point in waiting for someone who wasn't going to return. As she headed to her bedroom, Arya couldn't shake off the lingering sense of disappointment and confusion. Was she even considering waiting for him? The thought left a furrow on her brow as she entered her room and settled onto her bed. Tomorrow was a new day, she reminded herself, trying to push away the thoughts of Alexander and their situation. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, hoping sleep would soon find her amidst the turmoil of her thoughts. The following day, Arya woke up due to the soft rays of morning sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. She stretched lazily, feeling the comfort of the bed enveloping her for a moment longer, before reluctantly rising to start the day. She came out of her bedroom, stretching her hands as she walked towards the kitchen to take a glass of water. She suddenly felt thirsty. Pouring water into the glass, she took a few sips, the cool liquid refreshing against her parched throat. As she set the glass down, the silence of the house enveloped her, and she couldn't help but notice the absence of Alexander. He hadn't come back home. "He is not back," she said. Feeling a pang of disappointment mixed with curiosity, Arya glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall. It was already past 8 in the morning. Her mind began to wander, imagining where he could be, what he could be doing. Was he still at the nightclub, or perhaps somewhere else entirely? She suddenly shook her head. "I have more important things at hand instead of thinking about where my supposed husband spent his night," she thought. She had a busy day ahead, with plans to visit her father's house to collect her belongings. But what would she wear to her father's house? Would she wear one of Alexander's clothes again? As Arya left the kitchen, Alexander walked in through the front door. She was surprised to see he had changed his clothes since last night. She wondered if he had slept at the nightclub or stayed at a hotel. Despite her curiosity, she remembered he wanted her to mind her own business. Still, the idea of being a good wife made her worry, even though she didn't want to interfere. Alexander remained in a position for a moment as his gaze met with Arya before walking towards her, holding out a small package towards her. She looked at the outstretched package, her brows furrowed as she accepted it. "What is this?" she asked. "Thought you might like this," Alexander said, his tone softer than before. "For our outing today." She narrowed her gaze at him before slowly unwrapping the package's contents. Inside was a stunning gown, a pristine white dress adorned with delicate lace detailing and a flowing silhouette. It was a mix of elegance and sophistication. Arya looked at the dress, feeling a mix of surprise and confusion. It was a stunning white gown, something she'd never owned before. She couldn't deny its beauty, but she also couldn't shake off the feeling that it was too much, too extravagant for her. She wasn't used to being treated like that, especially by Alexander. Was this his way of trying to make up for his cold behavior? Or was it just a practical gift because she had nothing else to wear? She couldn't quite figure it out, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't in love with him, and this dress wouldn't change that. With a trembling smile, Arya looked up at Alexander, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. It's perfect." Alexander's expression softened briefly when he saw Arya's reaction to the dress, but then it turned cold again as he tried to hide his feelings. It's just a dress, Arya. I bought it because I realized you had nothing suitable to wear to your family's house. There's no need to make a fuss over it. Go ahead and get dressed. He told her. Arya went to her room to dress up. When Arya descended the stairs in her stunning white gown, her black hair elegantly tied back in a ponytail, Alexander couldn't help but be mesmerized by her beauty. Her rosy lips glistened with a faint lip gloss, reminding him of the delicate touch they had shared when they kissed. For a fleeting moment, he felt a sense of pride knowing she was his wife. Let's go, he said casually, breaking the spell. Arya nodded in response and followed him to the car. As the gate to the Johnsons' mansion swung open and Alexander drove in, Arya stole a quick glance at herself in the rearview mirror. She couldn't help but notice how good she looked. Gone were the days of sleepless nights and heavy bags under her eyes from endless house chores at her father's house. Today, she felt refreshed and well-rested, a stark contrast to her previous routine. Is there something wrong? Arya asked as she noticed Alexander's gaze lingering on her. Caught off guard, Alexander quickly withdrew his gaze, a small smile playing on his lips. I didn't expect Mrs. Harrington to be such a... Well, you look great, Alexander muttered, his words stumbling slightly as he complimented her appearance. No one could tell if Alexander's words were genuine or not, but they didn't sound sincere to Arya. Despite his compliment, it didn't sit well with her. Deciding to brush it off, she raised her eyes to the grand villa ahead and smirked. As they stepped out of the car, a few maids who had paused their work to glance at the elegant vehicle gasped when they saw Arya emerging with a handsome man. Rose snorted, her expression souring as she watched Arya and Alexander stepping out of the car. Her fellow maid, noticing her reaction, couldn't help but comment, "He's so handsome." She frowned, wondering why they were there so soon after their marriage. She couldn't shake the feeling that Alexander might not want Arya anymore, a thought that brought a sinister smile to her lips. Is it that Alexander wants to return her back? Is it that Alexander doesn't want to be married to Arya anymore? I'm sure she must have done something wrong to Alexander for them to be here, Rose mused, a wicked smile creeping across her lips as she chuckled. The other maids pondered for a moment, their gaze shifting towards Arya and Alexander as they made their way towards the house. It doesn't seem so to me. Instead, Arya looks even more pretty. She's putting on a new dress, one of the maids defended, her tone firm. Rose scoffed dismissively before heading into the house to inform the family about Arya and Alexander's presence. In the dining room, the family sat down to breakfast, Isabella, Grace, and David. Rose entered the room with an air of urgency, catching their attention. "Excuse me, ma'am, sir," Rose addressed Grace and David, her tone slightly different. "There's something you need to know." Grace raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "What is it, Rose?" "Don't keep us waiting." Rose glanced briefly at Isabella, who watched with keen interest. "Well, it's about Arya and her husband." Isabella's ears perked up at the mention of Arya's name, her expression turning slightly smug as she anticipated some juicy gossip. "What about them?" David asked, his tone indifferent. "They're here," Rose stated simply, her eyes darting between the three of them. Grace's face darkened at the news, while Isabella's smirk widened. "Here? What are they doing here?" "I don't know, ma'am." "They just arrived," Rose replied, trying to gauge their reactions. Grace exchanged a glance with David, a frown creasing her brow. "Well, we'll just have to see what they want." "Isabella, go and greet them. Make sure everything is in order." Isabella nodded eagerly, a plan already forming in her mind. "Of course, Mother. I'll go and see what they're up to." "Wait." David stopped Isabella. His fists clenched tightly at the mention of Alexander and Arya being in his house. The news only fueled his already simmering anger. "Those incompetent fools," he muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with bitterness. can't even keep their private affairs private. This morning, David had just woken up when one of his subordinates informed him about the latest news regarding his son-in-law. Apparently, Alexander had been spotted in a nightclub last night with the famous actress Elena Sterling, who had attended their wedding dressed like a bride. David felt a surge of shame wash over him at the thought of his son-in-law's reckless behavior. Disgraceful, he spat, his tone laced with contempt. Both of them are nothing but a disgrace to this family. He cast a disdainful glance towards Grace, silently blaming her for Arya's shortcomings. In his eyes, Isabella was the only one worthy of his affection and approval. I have no desire to entertain such nonsense. He spat out coldly. David gritted his teeth in embarrassment, blaming his daughter for not being able to satisfy her husband. He couldn't fathom what mistakes she might have made. In contrast, Isabella, in his eyes, was far superior to Arya. He viewed Arya's marriage as an embarrassment, and both her and her husband disgusted him. He worried about what people would think of their family. Knowing that Alexander was the least favorite son of his father made David even more disgusted. He felt relieved that his beloved daughter Isabella hadn't married such a loser. Grace's smug smile widened as she observed her husband's agitation. She saw an opportunity to stir the pot further and couldn't resist. "Darling, we can't ignore them," Grace interjected smoothly, her voice dripping with faux concern. It wouldn't be wise to turn them away. After all, what would people say if they found out we refused to welcome our own daughter and her husband? She leaned in closer to David, her tone conspiratorial. "Let's invite them in for breakfast. We can find out why they're here and address any concerns they might have. It's the civilized thing to do. Arya must have done something for Alexander to be here, don't you think so?" Isabella, sensing an opportunity to revel in Arya's misfortune, chimed in eagerly. "Yes, father, let's see what Arya has to say for herself." David sighed heavily, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on him. Reluctantly, he nodded in agreement. "Fine," he conceded, his voice tinged with resignation. "Invite them in, but make it quick. I don't want them lingering any longer than necessary." "How could you be so stupid?" David added with a sneer. Arya gave her father an indifferent smile. "I don't understand what you mean, father." She raised a brow, feigning innocence. David scoffed, infuriated by his daughter's expression and remark. Alexander, looking at David and Grace lazily, a frown creasing his face, spoke coldly. "We're here for Arya's belongings." Grace's eyes widened in surprise and disbelief. She hadn't expected that. David frowned, then glanced at Arya. So they had come here to take her belongings. He would smile in relief. That meant she hadn't angered Alexander. "Ah, I see," David began, attempting to cover up his earlier assumption with a forced smile. "I must have been mistaken. It was quite surprising to see you both here, especially considering you just got married yesterday." Alexander's expression remained composed as he addressed David's accusations. "I don't understand why you assume Arya did something wrong for us to be here, father-in-law." David chuckled nervously. "Yes, my apologies. It was a bit of a shock to see you both here so soon after the wedding. I mean, who wouldn't think the way I did?" "You two had just gotten married not even a day ago," Alexander offered a dry smile. "We won't take much time," he assured. "I'm just going to get my belongings and then we'll leave," Arya added calmly. David chuckled nervously, attempting to ease the tension. "Well then, since you're here, why not join us for breakfast?" Alexander hesitated for a moment before nodding in acceptance. "Very well, if you insist." Arya frowned immediately. Alexander accepted the invitation. Why would he do that? Alexander sat on Arya's right, with Isabella on her left. Rose and another maid came to serve them breakfast, offering bacon and hot tea. While serving tea, Rose's eyes kept drifting towards Alexander and Arya, glaring at Arya discreetly. "That's enough. The two of you may take your leave," Grace told them with a dismissive tone. Grace's eyes twinkled mischievously as she glanced at Arya, relishing the knowledge that her stepdaughter's marriage was already facing troubles. I'm really glad I got to have breakfast with you today. I hope you are okay, Isabella said to Arya with fake innocence, breaking the silence in the room. Arya glanced at Isabella, her lips curling into a sardonic smile. Oh, how considerate of you to inquire about my well-being, Isabella, she remarked, her tone tinged with sarcasm. I'm just fine, thank you for your concern. You're welcome, Isabella replied with a forced smile. Isabella's eyes subtly scrutinized Arya's attire, her brows furrowing as she observed the elegance of the dress. The thought nagged her. Who had bought such a sophisticated outfit for Arya? Was it Alexander? Tilting her head, Isabella's gaze flicked at Alexander. He doesn't seem like a guy who has money. He must have used his family's money. That must be it, she mused silently. Masking her thoughts with a sly smile, Isabella addressed Arya in a sweet tone. I'm glad that you're fine, Arya. I was really thinking about you a moment ago before Rose came to tell us about your arrival. You didn't hurt yourself when you saw the news, right? Her words dripped with faux concern. Arya squinted her eyes, confused by what Isabella was hinting at. What are you talking about? Why would I hurt myself? She questioned, her tone tinged with confusion. Meanwhile, Alexander, who had been silently watching, frowned, sensing that Isabella wasn't being honest. Feigning a shocked gasp, Isabella persisted. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about, she insisted. I know it must be embarrassing and hurtful to see the news of your newlywed husband in the nightclub with a famous actress, she added, her voice laced with a hint of malice. Although Arya hadn't heard about the news, she was surprised when Isabella mentioned it. But deep down, she felt like Isabella was making it up. So she gave Isabella a disgusted look, not believing her words. I understand how you must feel, Arya, but I'm sure your husband must have some explanations about all of this, Grace chimed in, her tone dripping with condescension. When your father got the news this morning, he was hurt and angry. This is nothing but a shame to our family name. What would people say about our family? She added, her words laden with judgment. Turning to glance at Alexander, Arya found him maintaining his aloof demeanor. He didn't seem fazed by the accusations. The accusations must be true considering his expression. Arya glanced back at Grace, who had a smug expression. She understood their game. They were trying to mock and shame her even more in front of her father. She had married the illegitimate third son of the Harrington family, but now, just a day after their wedding, he was caught with another woman at a nightclub. Grace and Isabella seemed pleased with the news, intentionally bringing it up to see her react. But Arya wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fidget. She wanted them to know that their words couldn't hurt her. She didn't care if her husband was with someone else. Arya's lips suddenly curled up into a sweet smile. What my husband does is his business. It doesn't concern me, she calmly responded. Grace scoffed, then made a sad face. My dear Arya, you don't need to adopt such a nonchalant attitude now, do you? After all, one must consider the reputation of the family one comes from, she remarked, her tone dripping with insinuation. Isn't it rather shameful that you couldn't even keep your own husband to yourself? And to think you've barely been married a day and you've already made quite a scandal, she added with a sly smile. Her eyes met with Arya's. Arya's face tensed up, her eyes narrowing with a hint of anger. She'd keep her lips tight, trying to hide the rage bubbling inside, her hands clenched into fists under the table, a silent sign of her inner turmoil. Despite the insults, she'd try to keep her cool, not letting them see how much their words sting. But underneath it all, there's a fire burning. Isabella took a delicate sip from her tea, her lips curling into a faux of sympathetic smile. Arya, I think Mother is right. Surely Alexander didn't mean to hurt you, did he? She inquired, tilting her head slightly. Her gaze flitted to Alexander, who remained composed and unfazed by their conversation. Isabella's thoughts darkened as she observed his calm demeanor. What's wrong with him? Why won't he admit or deny the rumors? He must be a coward, she silently seethed to herself. Continuing her manipulative charade, Isabella leaned in slightly, her voice laced with false concern. You know, Arya, I couldn't help but notice that you haven't checked your phone this morning. Perhaps you haven't seen the tabloids yet, she suggested. It's quite scandalous, really. The woman he was seen with, Elena Sterling, was the one who wore that white gown to your wedding, isn't she? Shameless, isn't it? To be seen with a married man in a nightclub and... Enough. This discussion ends here. We will not discuss my daughter's personal matters at the breakfast table. Is that clear? David cut in, sternly, glaring at Isabella. Did David just call Arya his daughter? Isabella flinched, taken aback by her father's tone. This was the first time her father had ever raised his voice at her and given her that look. She remained frozen. Grace was also frozen, staring at her husband in shock. Did he just yell at Isabella, the apple of his eyes? Is that clear? David asked coolly. Yes, Dad, she stammered out. Arya's eyes widened at her father's intervention with Isabella's malicious words. Though she knew the reason why her father put an end to Isabella's words, it was to save face in front of Alexander. Her father never liked her, so there was no way he would stop his favorite daughter's provocative words. David chuckled awkwardly, offering a smile to Alexander, who met his gaze with an unwavering stare. He made an effort to keep his composure in front of Alexander, not wanting to give the impression of any disrespect towards him or Arya, knowing how valuable Alexander's family connections were, despite his thoughts of how Alexander was a loser. Seems like the morning gossip is quite lively today, Alexander remarked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. But forgive me if I don't join in on the family drama. I have better things to do than entertain baseless rumors. David looked at Alexander. I apologize for the inappropriate conversation at the table. Let's put an end to it and enjoy our meal. Afterward, you can proceed to take Arya's belongings. Isabella's frown deepened as the focus shifted away from the scandal involving Alexander. Frustrated by Arya's apparent indifference, she clenched her teeth and deliberately spilled her tea on Arya, and as the scalding liquid made contact with Arya's white dress, she winced in pain. The hot tea seeped through the fabric, causing a mixture of pain and shock to flash across Arya's face. Isabella quickly put her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, Arya, I am so sorry, Isabella exclaimed, her voice laced with false concern. I didn't mean to spill the tea on you. It was just an accident. I hope you're not hurt. Arya gritted her teeth, suppressing the urge to lash out in anger. The pain from the scalding tea seeping through her dress was intense, but she forced herself to remain composed. With a strained smile, she replied, It's all right, Isabella. Accidents happen. This was no accident. Isabella did it on purpose, Arya thought, glaring at Isabella. Alexander's expression darkened as he observed the exchange. Despite Isabella's attempt to pass it off as an accident, he sensed the underlying hostility. Alexander quickly rose from his seat, his eyes fixed on Arya as she winced in pain from the hot tea spill. Are you okay? He asked, his voice laced with genuine worry as he reached out to gently touch her arm. Arya looked up at him, shocked at his action, then nodded. David's expression showed concern for Isabella and irritation towards Arya, as he likely believed Isabella's feigned apology and assumed it was an accident. He furrowed his brows slightly, showing his discomfort with the situation, but not intervening further, as his favoritism towards Isabella influences his perception. Grace's eyes rolled in a display of disbelief, followed by a smile that carried a hint of mockery. Why are you so clumsy, Isabella? She remarked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Now you've ruined Arya's pretty dress. I'm sorry, Arya, I didn't mean to. Isabella apologized. Arya clenched her fists, her smile forced as she responded. It's okay. I'll go clean myself. Let me help you clean up, Arya, Isabella offered. Arya waved off Isabella's offer with a forced, polite smile. No thank you, Isabella. I can manage on my own. Isabella persisted, her tone sugary sweet but with a subtle undertone. Oh, come on, Arya. Let me help you. It's the least I can do after my little mishap. David glanced at Arya, his expression unreadable. Yes, Isabella, help your sister clean up. And be more careful next time, he instructed, his voice tinged with a hint of annoyance. Arya stared at her father, the look on his face threatening her not to disobey him. She frowned. I appreciate your help, Isabella, she said. Isabella gave a triumphant smile as Arya stood up from her chair. Alexander's voice carried a hint of concern as he addressed Arya. Are you sure you're all right, Arya? He asked softly, his eyes reflecting genuine worry for her well-being. I'm all right, Arya said with a warm smile. Alexander nodded, eyes darting to Isabella. He didn't know why, but it just doesn't feel right leaving Arya alone with her. Do you want me to go with you? He asked. Arya looked at him in confusion. What was this look in his eyes? Why would he want to follow her? No, there's no need. I have Isabella to help me, she said. But Alexander didn't feel any sincerity in her words. Isabella forced a sweet smile. Do not worry, brother-in-law. I'll take care of your wife. With Arya and Isabella exiting the dining room, David turned his attention back to Alexander. Alexander, I'm so sorry for what happened earlier. Let this not bring conflict between us. Rest assured that I don't judge you for wanting to be with another woman during your honeymoon. I apologize for my wife and daughters, he said, attempting not to lose face in front of Alexander. Alexander's eyes widened in disbelief, a subtle furrow forming between his brows as he processed David's words. His lips parted slightly, but he remained silent. Despite his calm appearance, Alexander felt a surge of unease mixed with anger. He couldn't believe Arya's father would say something so disrespectful towards his daughter. Alexander's expression remained impassive. Before we talk about apologies, I think your wife and Isabella owe one to Arya first, he stated firmly, his voice tinged with disappointment. David, struggling to keep his temper in check, forced a smile. I don't think that would be necessary. You, he began, his words trailing off. Alexander interrupted David with a calm yet assertive tone. With all due respect, David, I insist that your wife and Isabella apologize to Arya for their behavior, he stated firmly, his gaze unwavering. Grace couldn't help but glare at Alexander, then turned to her husband. Impossible. You can't possibly make me and my daughter apologize to that girl. Keep quiet, woman, David said deep in thoughts. Who is he to demand an apology from my wife and daughter to Arya? How dare he? Is it because he's from the Harrington family? He is nothing, David said in his thoughts. Grace gave one disgustful look at Alexander and stood up. I will go check up on Arya and Isabella, she said and stormed off in anger, leaving the two men at the dining room to talk. Arya was strolling down the corridor when Isabella abruptly closed the distance and seized her arm. She turned to look at Isabella with a pointed look. Is there something you need, Isabella? She asked, her tone cool and composed. Isabella's lips curled into a smirk as she looked at Arya. Oh, poor Arya. Did my little accident ruin your day? She taunted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Seems like even your husband prefers the company of other women over you. Must sting, doesn't it? Arya's gaze hardened as she stared back at Isabella, her voice calm but laced with resolve. You know, Isabella, it's fascinating how you always seem to find joy in other people's pain, she retorted, her words cutting through the air like a knife. But let me assure you, your petty attempts to hurt me won't work anymore. I've seen through your games, and I'm done playing along. Isabella responded with a smirk, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, please, Arya, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. You must think you're going to live a good life after getting married to Alexander. But let's face it, marrying into the Harrington family won't change who you really are, a loser in this family. And now, with your pathetic excuse for a husband, you're just another embarrassment. Arya's eyes narrowed. You're one to talk about settling, she quipped, her tone laced with sarcasm. At least my husband didn't marry me for my father's money or to get close to you. Grace suddenly appeared in the corridor. You're flattering yourself after getting married to Alexander, Arya. Do you think that the marriage meant anything to him? She said, walking towards them, crossed her arms and gave a smug look at Arya. Grace had left the dining room in anger after what Alexander had said. Who does he think he is, demanding an apology from me? She fumed inwardly. I'll never stoop so low as to apologize to that girl. What are you going to do now, sister? Not only is your husband a loser, Isabella began, her words dripping with malice. Arya's expression darkened abruptly. Watch your mouth, Isabella. You have no right to call him that, she interjected sharply, her voice cold as ice. Isabella stared at her stepsister in disbelief. What? You can't handle the truth. Isn't he? Isabella, Arya cut in, her tone low and threatening, as she closed the distance between them. Isabella looked at Arya in confusion. What was that scary look? Is Arya out of her mind? Meanwhile, all the while, Alexander, who had just left the dining room to get Arya, heard all they were saying. He had heard every word, particularly when Arya had defended him. He hated what he was witnessing. Mother and daughter bullying his wife. What sort of family is this? The fact that they dare call Arya names irritated him. Step back, wench. Who are you to threaten my daughter? Do not you forget your place. A nobody like you have no right to look at my daughter that way, Grace sneered. No wonder your mother died while giving birth to you. Arya's expression hardened even further at Grace's cruel words. Her jaw clenched tightly as she fought to control her emotions. The mention of her late mother struck a painful chord within her, but she refused to show weakness in front of Grace and Isabella. Deep down, she felt a surge of anger and frustration at the injustice of it all. How could they treat her this way, especially after everything she had endured? But she knew she couldn't let them see how much their words hurt her. She had to remain strong, for herself and for revenge. Despite the chaos swirling inside her, Arya's outward demeanor remained composed, her gaze steady as she locked eyes with Grace. She refused to back down, refusing to let them see how deeply their words cut. Inside, however, a storm of emotions raged within her. Anger, sadness, and a burning desire to stand up for herself against the relentless cruelty of her stepmother and stepsister. She knew she couldn't let them break her spirit, no matter how hard they tried. Grace's lips twisted into a scornful smirk as she glared at Arya, her eyes flashing with malice. Did you really think you had a choice in marrying Alexander? She taunted, her tone dripping with contempt. Let me tell you something, dear. No matter how hard you try to pretend otherwise, you'll always be nothing more than a pathetic little girl who couldn't even keep her own husband in line. Isabella's expression twisted into a smug grin as she enjoyed herself in her mother's cruel words, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction at seeing Arya's pain. Arya's heart clenched at Grace's cruel words, her mother's memory adding an extra layer of pain to the insult. But she refused to let Grace see how deeply her words cut. Instead, she held her head high, her resolve unshaken, determined not to let her stepmother's venomous words break her spirit. Arya took a deep breath, her voice steady but tinged with restrained anger. You two may think you can say whatever you want to me, but I won't stand here and let you insult my husband or my mother, she declared, her words firm. Grace's smirk faltered for a moment as she exchanged a glance with Isabella, but then she regained her composure, her eyes narrowing with malice. Your husband? Don't make me laugh, Arya, she scoffed. Her scoff echoed down the corridor, cutting through the air like a knife. And what did you expect, Arya? She sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. How could you possibly hope to keep a man when you couldn't even keep your own mother alive? Arya's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and pain at Grace's callous words. But she refused to let her stepmother see how deeply her words wounded her. Instead, she held her head high, her gaze unwavering as she met Grace's icy stare. Hearing all the heartless words spewing from Grace and Isabella's lips, Alexander felt a surge of anger at his wife's family for being even worse than he had heard. He felt sad knowing all these hurtful words were being said to Arya and imagining how she must be feeling. He was angry at himself for misunderstanding her and for ever doubting her character, Suddenly he felt a strong desire to protect her, to be her stability, shield her from any harm, and stand up for her against her family. He felt more than pity for her. He couldn't help but want to support her. "Arya," he called out, striding towards them. His voice shook Grace and Isabella as they turned in shock to see him approaching. Had he heard what they were saying to Arya? Arya's head snapped around at the sound of her name, her eyes widening in astonishment as she locked gazes with Alexander. How long had he been standing there, witnessing their exchange? Her heart skipped a beat at the sight of him striding purposefully towards her. Alexander's heart pounded in his chest as he strode towards them, his steps fueled by a strong mix of anger and concern. With each stride, a fierce determination to protect Arya at all costs burned within him. As Alexander reached Arya's side, he swiftly took hold of her wrist, his touch firm yet protective. His gaze softened as he looked at her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with genuine worry. Arya glanced up at him, her expression softening at the sight of him. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice steady, though there was a hint of gratitude in her eyes as she looked at him. She knew he was there for her. Then, with a cold expression, he turned to face Grace and Isabella, his eyes narrowing with disapproval. "That's enough," he stated firmly, his voice carrying a tone of authority. "You will not speak to my wife in such a manner." Feeling his grip on her wrist, Arya glanced down, noticing the warmth of his touch. Slowly, she looked up at him, her eyes meeting him with surprise and confusion. Why did he say that? As Alexander pulled her along, she felt a sense of security wash over her. Looking at his clenched jaw and the intensity in his eyes, Arya couldn't help but wonder why he was so angry. Yet amidst her curiosity, she couldn't deny the comfort of his presence. As they continued walking, Arya suddenly remembered something important she needed to gather from her room. She stopped in her tracks, causing Alexander to halt beside her. "Wait, Alexander," she said, gently tugging on his arm to get his attention. "I need to grab a few things from my room. Can we go there first?" Alexander paused, turning to look at her with a furrowed brow. "Your things?" he repeated, his tone tinged with concern. "Oh, that's true. We came here to get her belongings. I can't believe we almost forgot," he thought. "I can get you a new set of clothes and anything else you want. Or is there something else you want to take?" Arya nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for causing him worry. "Yes, just a few important items," she explained, her gaze meeting him with sincerity. Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes as he nodded in response. "Of course," he said gently, his grip on her wrist loosening as he guided her back towards the corridor they had just left. As they retraced their steps, Arya's heart fluttered with gratitude for Alexander's understanding. Despite everything that has happened between them, Arya couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort, glad that he had defended her in front of her stepmother and stepsister. It must be hard for her to say, but honestly, she was glad he was by her side, even if she thinks it's just for a while. They stepped into Arya's bedroom, and Alexander's eyes swept over the space, taking in its small and stark appearance. The room was cramped, with barely enough space to move around. The walls were painted in a dull, faded color, devoid of any warmth or personality. There were no decorations or personal touches to be found, giving the room an air of emptiness and neglect. Alexander felt a pang of sympathy as he realized just how little care had been given to Arya's living space. It was clear that she had been given the bare minimum, with no thought given to her comfort or happiness. The stark contrast between her modest surroundings and the luxurious lifestyle he was accustomed to make him acutely aware of the injustice of it all. He couldn't help but feel a surge of anger towards Grace and David for their callous treatment of Arya. By the words from David's mouth earlier about his daughter, Alexander wasn't surprised that he was maltreating his own daughter. It was clear that they had not only neglected her physical well-being, but had also disregarded her emotional needs. As Arya hurried over to her box, she carefully packed a few essential items, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and some important documents. She paused for a moment, her fingers lingering over the only picture she had of her mother before gently tucking it into the box. Alongside these items, she added a few art supplies, sketch pads, pencils, and charcoal sticks that she used to express herself and find solace in her artwork. Watching Arya pack her belongings, Alexander couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He had known about the truth of her life in this family, yet he had still judged her based on what he had seen. Arya in an intimate position with Ryan. Seeing the stark reality of her living situation now made him realize just how much she had endured. As Arya zipped up her little box and turned to face him with a small smile, Alexander's gaze softened. "I'm done," she said softly. Alexander raised a curious brow, glancing at the modestly packed box. "Huh? Is that all?" he asked, his gaze indicating her belongings. Arya nodded in response, her expression almost childlike. "Yes, that's all." "I don't have that much stuff," she replied. A few moments later, in the living room, Alexander carried Arya's box, his expression indifferent as he entered and noticed Grace, Isabella, and David. Grace put on a fake, motherly smile. "Arya, won't you stay a little longer?" she asked. "There's no need to be hypocritical when hurtful words have been said," Alexander replied coldly, his words cutting through the tension. Grace's embarrassment showed as she raised her voice. "What are you talking about? What hurtful words?" Grace's fake smile faltered at Alexander's cold response, her attempt at motherly concern crumbling under his piercing gaze. His words cut through the tension in the room, exposing the underlying hostility that lingered between them. Alexander's expression remained stern as he addressed Grace directly. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," he stated firmly. "The disrespect towards Arya hasn't gone unnoticed. It's time to stop." David looked between Alexander and Grace, confusion evident on his face. He couldn't piece together what Alexander was referring to. Grace had left the dining room a few minutes ago, followed shortly by Alexander claiming he wanted to help Arya with her things. But now, with Grace and Isabella back in the dining room without Arya, tension filled the air. David turned to Grace, his glare asking what she had done. "Alexander, can you explain what's happening?" David asked, seeking clarification. "You should ask your wife that question," Alexander replied firmly. "Let Grace know that since Arya is my wife, I won't let anyone hurt her, not even you or Isabella." Arya's heart skipped a beat as if she had grasped a lifeline in this turbulent journey. She looked up and met Alexander's gaze. Instead of a cold look, his eyes were now filled with deep affection. For a moment she believed every word he had said. Was he truly committed to protecting her from harm, or had he merely said it to save face? Alexander's domineering aura left David and Grace frozen for several seconds. David finally spoke up, attempting to downplay the situation. There must have been a misunderstanding. Grace and Isabella would never do anything to hurt Arya. "Isn't that true, Arya?" he asked, his eyes pleading for her agreement. But Arya didn't spare him a glance and walked away, completely ignoring him. David frowned and gritted his teeth, feeling insulted by his daughter's behavior. How could she disrespect him in front of her husband? "You see, Alexander," David began, about to say something, but Alexander abruptly left, cutting him off. David's expression would be a mix of disdain and frustration as he watched Arya walk away, ignoring his attempt to salvage the situation. His dislike for Arya and Alexander was evident in the way his lips pressed into a thin line, his brows furrowing in irritation. Turning to Grace and Isabella, David's eyes flashed with resentment as he addressed them. "This is all you're doing," he accused, his voice dripping with contempt. "You've poisoned Arya's mind against us, and now she's disrespecting her own father." Grace and Isabella exchanged satisfied glances, a smug smile playing on their lips. "Dad, please don't tell me you believed what Alexander said about us. It's not true. Mother will never do anything to hurt Arya. Neither will I," Isabella said, looking at her father with innocent eyes, but deep down she was happy to see her father like this. David looked at Isabella and nodded. "As for Alexander," David continued, his tone laced with bitterness, He's no better than Arya, caught cavorting with another woman in a nightclub just a day after marrying my daughter. Disgraceful. His words were filled with disdain for both Arya and Alexander, his resentment towards them palpable. It was clear that David's disgust for them ran deep, and he had no qualms about expressing it, especially in front of Grace and Isabella, who shared his disdain. Out of the Johnson family, Alexander still held Arya's wrist with one hand, his grip firm yet gentle. With his other hand, he firmly gripped her box, a silent symbol of his commitment to protecting her. He abruptly stopped in his tracks, releasing his hold on Arya's wrist. With a determined stride, he made his way to the car, unlocking the trunk and carefully placing Arya's box inside. He then turned to look at Arya, and the determination he saw in her eyes during her distressed moment flashed through his mind. With a furrowed brow, Alexander closed the distance between them, his gaze unwavering as he observed Arya. "Have you eaten?" he inquired, his voice soft yet insistent. Arya met his gaze, a mixture of surprise and defiance flickering in her eyes. "I have already eaten, isn't that obvious?" she retorted, her tone tinged with annoyance. Alexander sighed, a hint of frustration crossing his features. "I was watching you. You literally didn't even touch the food," he pointed out, his tone betraying his concern. Arya narrowed her gaze at him, her guard still up. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. Alexander's expression softened, a mixture of empathy and concern evident in his eyes as he regarded Arya. "What do you mean?" he asked gently, his tone sincere. Arya's expression softened slightly, her guard beginning to lower in the face of Alexander's genuine concern. "Do you feel bad for me?" she questioned, her voice tinged with a hint of vulnerability as she searched his eyes for any sign of pity. "I mean, you saw and heard how my family treated me. My room isn't even half the size of Isabella's, with no proper color or furniture. You heard how my so-called stepmother speaks to me," Arya said, her voice wavering slightly as she struggled to contain her emotions. "Your husband? How do you possibly expect to keep a man when you couldn't even keep your own mother alive? You heard all of it, so that must be the reason why you're being nice to me. It's because you pity me, right?" She forced a smile, though her eyes betrayed her inner turmoil. Alexander's expression darkened with anger as he listened to Arya's words, his jaw tensing at the mention of the hurtful remarks made by her family. The pain in her voice resonated with him, stirring a deep sense of indignation at the injustice of her situation. He didn't say anything for a moment. "We can't talk here. Let's get home first," he stated. With a stern expression, Alexander guided Arya into the passenger seat, his movements deliberate and forceful. As he settled into the driver's seat, he slammed the door shut with a resounding thud, causing Arya to flinch slightly. She stole a cautious glance at Alexander's darkened face, her mind swirling with confusion. In the quiet of the car, Alexander ignited the engine, and they sped away with a sudden burst of speed. Arya gripped the handle, her eyes darting nervously to Alexander, who drove with fierce determination, his gaze fixed ahead. The Aston Martin Vantage F1 racer raced down the quiet street, the sound of its engine echoing through the air. Eventually, the car came to a stop at a nearby park, where the afternoon sunlight cast a golden glow over the tranquil scene. Arya felt a sense of calm wash over her as she took in the serene beauty of the park. The peaceful surroundings provided a stark contrast to the tension that had filled the car moments before. "Do you want to step out and take a walk in the park?" Alexander's voice broke the silence, his tone lazy yet inviting. Turning to face him, Arya noticed that the anger had faded from his features, replaced by a sense of calmness. Alexander casually held the steering wheel with one hand while the other rested on the gear stick. His gray eyes were fixed on the swing in the distance, a hint of nostalgia flickering in his gaze. Despite his relaxed demeanor, there was an undeniable air of arrogance about him, followed by his well-defined and charming features, all concealed beneath the allure of his captivating gray eyes. Feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment, Arya hastily lowered her head, determined to avoid dwelling on how irresistibly handsome he appeared. She scolded herself internally, reminding herself not to succumb to the temptation of admiring him too openly. "No," she replied to his question, her voice barely above a whisper, her gaze still lowered. Alexander shifted his gaze, meeting Arya's clear yet vacant stare. Once again, he found himself drawn to her eyes, which held a captivating mixture of sadness and determination. Despite their emptiness, there was a depth to them that intrigued him, stirring a sense of empathy within him. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Arya than met the eye. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the steering wheel as he pondered his next words. "Have you ever thought of getting even?" he asked suddenly, his voice tinged with curiosity. Arya's brows furrowed in confusion at his question. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice betraying her uncertainty. "Your ex," Alexander continued casually, reaching for a cigar in the pack of cigarettes in his breast pocket. He lit it with practiced ease before taking a contemplative drag. "He sounds like quite the scoundrel. Don't you want to retaliate?" Arya sighed softly, her thoughts swirling with a mixture of emotions. "You're saying all this because you pity me," she said quietly, her voice tinged with resignation. "But pity is the last thing I need right now. What I need is someone who truly understands me, someone I can rely on." She paused, her gaze meeting Alexander's with a sense of determination. "I barely know you, Alexander," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "You're like a mystery to me, sometimes distant, sometimes kind. I don't know who you truly are, and I don't need someone to pity me. I need someone who's genuine, someone who's willing to stand by me through thick and thin." As the words hung in the air between them, Arya couldn't help but wonder if Alexander was truly capable of being that person for her. "No, Arya, it's not pity," he responded firmly, his voice laced with conviction. "I don't feel sorry for you. I feel angry. Angry at the way they treat you, angry at the hurtful things they say. You deserve so much better than this." His gaze softened as he reached out to gently wipe away the tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I care about you, Arya," he admitted softly, his eyes locking with hers. "And I won't let anyone hurt you like this again." As he spoke, a surge of protectiveness welled up within him, driving him to stand by her side and shield her from further harm. He may have initially judged her based on a misunderstanding, but now, seeing the truth of her pain, his feelings for her were clear. He cared deeply for her, and he was determined to prove it. Arya's heart swelled with a mix of emotions as she listened to Alexander's words. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such sincerity and genuine concern. Despite her initial reluctance to believe him, she couldn't deny the earnestness in his eyes, the way his words resonated with her on a deep level. At that moment, Alexander wasn't just her husband. He was her protector, her shield against the cruelty of the world. The realization filled her with a sense of relief, a feeling that she wasn't alone in her struggles. Arya's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she looked at Alexander, her emotions swirling inside her like a tempest. "I want revenge," she whispered, her voice tinged with determination. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of Arya's pain and anger. It was a declaration born out of years of mistreatment and injustice, a desire to reclaim her dignity and assert her strength in the face of adversity. "What do you mean?" Alexander asked, his voice soft yet probing. He could sense the fire burning within Arya, the fierce resolve to fight back against those who had wronged her. Arya took a deep breath, her gaze steady as she met Alexander's eyes. "I mean, I'm tired of being treated like I'm less than nothing," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm tired of being pushed around and belittled by people who think they're better than I. I want to show them that they can't break me, that I'm stronger than they think. Tell me, why did you agree to marry me? You could have refused or run away to avoid marrying a man you've never met. Why did you go through with it?" Alexander's voice was firm but curious. "Is it for revenge? For Isabella and Ryan?" he pressed. Arya looked at him for a moment, unsure whether she should tell him the truth, but considering the fact he had said he wouldn't let anyone hurt her, she wanted to trust him. "Yes," That's why I agreed, Arya admitted, her tone resolute. Isabella wants your brother, and if I stay married to you, I'll do everything to make sure she doesn't get what she wants. Ryan, who loves her, will be hurt when he learns the truth about her. Everyone will suffer. I want them to regret what they did to me. I want Ryan to realize his mistake in playing me. He will come kneeling to me, begging for my forgiveness. That's what I want, she said firmly, her voice filled with determination. Alexander leaned in closer, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. Yes, that's what I want to hear, he replied, his tone tinged with approval. I can help you get your revenge, Alexander said casually, glancing at Arya before shifting his gaze to the children laughing and playing in the park. Instant relief washed over him after saying that. Arya looked up at him with widened eyes. How? Do you really mean that? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Alexander smirked. I told you, didn't I? You're my woman, and I won't let anyone hurt you, he replied confidently. Tears welled up in Arya's eyes as she looked at Alexander, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Alexander cleared his throat, a hint of warmth in his eyes. But I'll help you on one condition, he added, his tone serious. Arya's thoughts raced as she processed Alexander's offer. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope stirring within her. Could he really help her get revenge? The possibility seemed both exhilarating and daunting. Her expression softened as she looked at Alexander, a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty flickering in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he could be the ally she desperately needed. But a part of her remained cautious, wary of putting her faith in anyone after enduring so much betrayal and heartache. Nevertheless, she couldn't ignore the warmth in Alexander's eyes, the sincerity in his voice. Maybe, just maybe, he could be the one to help her turn the tables on her tormentors. With a hesitant smile, Arya nodded, silently acknowledging his condition. Deep down, she knew that whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't have to face it alone anymore. Alexander smiled, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Now, shall we begin the first step of our revenge? What do you have in mind? He asked, his voice filled with determination. Arya bit her lip, her gaze fixed straight ahead. I want to get a job, she replied, her voice tinged with resolve. Alexander furrowed his brow, curious. What kind of job? What kind of company? He inquired. The kind of company Ryan would never imagine I would get employed at. I want to be closer to my enemies to be able to exact my revenge, Arya explained. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. Would you like to work in a company like LH Star? Ryan also works there, he suggested. Arya's eyes widened in surprise at Alexander's suggestion, her mind racing with the possibilities. LH Star, the very company where Ryan worked. The thought sent a thrill of anticipation coursing through her veins. She turned to face Alexander. Yes, she replied firmly. That's exactly the kind of company I had in mind. But it's not easy getting a job at LH Star. LH Star is not just any company, Arya said, looking at him with uncertainty. Arya began to think, how would I possibly get a job at LH Star? No, it wouldn't be possible. Even children of the elites in our city have failed to get a job in such a company, she continued, her thoughts filled with doubt. If an elite child couldn't secure a position at LH Star, how could someone like me, without any connections or influence, possibly stand a chance? Alexander smirked, noticing the uncertainty on her face. She was right. He didn't easily let anyone he didn't approve of get a job in his company. Little did she know he was the owner of LH Star. Don't feel uncertain. Remember, you have me, he said, and their eyes met. But how would you do it? She asked. I have my way, Arya, Alexander said confidently, a hint of amusement in his voice. All you have to do is go for the job interview on Monday morning, he said. Now I've realized what a big mistake I made towards you, Alexander said, his tone somber as he turned to face Arya. She looked at him, a mixture of surprise and curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Why are you sometimes so angry and mean to me?" Arya asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "After all, you said we were to mind our own business and that we weren't real married couples, so why the change?" Alexander sighed, his gaze dropping momentarily before meeting Arya's once again. "It's because I saw you in an intimate position with Ryan," he admitted, his voice filled with regret. "I misunderstood what I saw, and it clouded my judgment. I thought you were going to cheat on him with him, and it fueled my anger." Arya raised a brow in confusion at first, trying to recall where and how Alexander might have seen her in an intimate position with Ryan. Then, realization dawned on her. During their wedding, when she had gone out for some fresh air, Ryan had cornered her and said a lot of disgusting things, holding her against her will. That must have been what Alexander had seen. No wonder he had that strange look on his face and had walked away that day. She hadn't known he would misinterpret their position. Her astonishment turned into understanding as she looked at Alexander. "I see," she murmured, her voice softening. "I'm sorry you had to witness that." "It wasn't what it seemed, Alexander. Ryan had forced himself upon me. I tried to push him away, but he wouldn't listen." She paused, her gaze locking with Alexander's. "I will never go back to him, not with what he has done to me, Alexander. You have to believe me." Alexander's expression softened as he listened to Arya's explanation. "I believe you, Arya," he said earnestly, reaching out to gently cup her cheek. "I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions and for treating you poorly. It was my mistake, and I'll do everything I can to make it right." After Arya heard Alexander's apology, she took a moment to process his words, feeling relieved. "Thank you for apologizing, Alexander," she said softly. "I didn't know you were behaving that way towards me because of what you had seen." "I will do anything I can to make it up to you," Alexander replied. Arya smiled, knowing he would. Suddenly, a thought came to her mind. Something she has been wondering and meaning to ask him. It was pertaining that woman. Could it be true Alexander was seen in the nightclub with Elena? Although she hadn't considered dwelling on it, but seeing his will to help her, she couldn't help but think that him saying he was going to help her has something to do with Elena. What could be his condition for helping her? "I'm curious to know this, but who is Elena to you?" Arya suddenly took the courage to ask. Just then, Alexander's cell phone rang, interrupting the moment. He glanced at the caller ID and saw it was Nathan, his personal assistant. With a slight frown, he answered the call, stepping out of the car. After walking a distance, he said, "Go ahead." "Sir, as you had expected, Julian was the one who invited Elena to your wedding. They were seen at a restaurant in Los Angeles a few days back. He has something up his sleeves, boss," Nathan said from the other end of the call. Alexander, listening intently to Nathan's urgent voice on the other end, his gaze turned sharp, and he was now a different person. He wants to eliminate all obstacles in his way of becoming the next heir. He will use any means necessary, Alexander said, then smirked. "Keep a close watch on Elena. She is not just here to attend an ex's wedding, but for something more. She may still think I have feelings for her," he added. "I will do so, sir." Nathan said, then paused before adding, "By the way, sir, you have an important business meeting that requires your immediate attention," he informed Alexander. "I will be there in 30 minutes, Alexander replied. Alexander walked back to the car and got in after ending the call. He turned to Arya, silently apologizing for the interruption. With his hands on the steering wheel, he stated, "I have something to take care of. I will drop you at the apartment first." He told her. "Okay." Arya nodded, feeling sad that her question had been left unanswered due to the phone call. The following day, Alexander paced back and forth in his office, his mind consumed with thoughts of Arya. After the events of the previous day, he was determined to do something to lift her spirits and show her how much he cared. He remembered the insults Arya endured at her family's house, and the sight of her small room with few clothes stirred something inside him. He made a silent vow to change that. Deciding to start with her wardrobe, Alexander wanted Arya to look good, classy, and sophisticated, qualities that would make Ryan and Isabella jealous. Plus, if Arya wanted to work at LH Star, she needed to dress the part. That's why he would suggest they go shopping. He knew his sister Jessica could help pick out the perfect outfits for Arya's transformation. After all, he promised to support her in seeking revenge, and upgrading her wardrobe was the first step in that plan. With a decisive nod, he reached for his phone and dialed his sister Jessica's number. As the call connected, his heart raced with anticipation. "Hey, Jessica," he greeted as soon as she answered. "I need your help with something." "Hey, Alex, what's up? How is your honeymoon going?" Jessica's cheerful voice echoed through the line, her excitement evident. "I want to take Arya shopping," Alexander explained, his tone serious. "After what happened yesterday, I think she could use some new clothes, and I want to make sure she has everything she needs." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Jessica responded, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "That's a great idea, Alex. I'd love to help. When are you thinking of going?" Jessica had wanted to ask him what happened yesterday, her curiosity piqued by his mention of the events. However, she decided against it. She respected Alexander's privacy and understood that some matters were meant to remain between husband and wife, even if they were close siblings. It wasn't her place to pry into their personal affairs, so she refrained from probing further. "I was thinking we could go today," Alexander suggested. "I'll bring her over to your mall, and you can take care of the rest. I trust your taste, Jess." "Absolutely, Alex. I'll make sure she gets everything she needs," Jessica promised, her excitement palpable. "Just bring her over whenever you're ready, and we'll take it from there." As Alexander ended the call, a sense of relief washed over him. He knew that Jessica would take good care of Arya and help her find the perfect wardrobe. With a determined smile, he made his way to the dining room for breakfast. Alexander and Arya were enjoying a cozy breakfast together, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the scent of warm pastries. They sat across from each other, stealing subtle glances whenever they thought the other wasn't looking. Arya's cheeks flushed slightly as she caught Alexander's gaze, quickly averting her eyes back to her food. "Arya!" Alexander's voice broke the comfortable silence, his tone gentle. "I have something planned for today. Would you like to go shopping with Jessica?" Arya looked up from her food, surprise evident in her eyes at the unexpected invitation. "Shopping with Jessica?" she repeated, a hint of curiosity in her voice. What does he mean by shopping with Jessica? Arya wondered. Alexander nodded, his expression earnest. "Yes, I thought it would be nice for you to have some new clothes considering everything that happened yesterday," he explained. "Jessica is excited to help, and I trust her taste. What do you say?" Arya's initial surprise gave way to a small smile as she considered Alexander's proposal. The idea of a shopping trip sounded appealing, especially with Jessica's expertise to guide her. "That sounds wonderful, Alexander," she replied, her voice soft with gratitude. "Thank you for thinking of me." Alexander's smile widened at her response, relieved to see her open to the idea. "Great, let's get ready then, after breakfast," he said. "We'll head over to Jessica's mall and she'll take care of the rest." Arya's heart fluttered with excitement as she finished her breakfast. Shopping? The prospect filled her with a sense of joy she hadn't felt in a long time. "Sure, sounds like a plan." "I will go get ready," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. Arya rose from the chair. Walking gracefully to her bedroom, she entered her bathroom, the anticipation of the day ahead filling her with joy. The warm water cascading over her skin washed away any lingering traces of unease, replacing them with a sense of liberation. Arya couldn't help but smile as she lathered her hair with shampoo, the simple act of pampering herself feeling like a luxury she rarely indulged in. The thought of shopping, of selecting clothes for herself, was a luxury she had never imagined. The mere sound of it was music to her ears, a welcome change from the days when she was dragged along by Isabella, forced to carry heavy bags as if she were nothing more than a servant. Today was different. Today, she was going shopping for herself, not as a maid for her stepsister, but as a woman in control of her own destiny. And that thought alone filled her with an indescribable sense of happiness. After her shower, Arya chose a floral dress that exuded both simplicity and elegance. The fabric was light and airy, allowing it to flow gracefully around her with each step she took. The dress featured short sleeves, a flattering V-neckline, and a knotted detail at the waist, accentuating her figure beautifully. With its mini length, it added a touch of youthful charm to her ensemble. As she slipped into the dress, Arya couldn't help but admire how it complemented her features, enhancing her natural beauty. With a final adjustment of the fabric, she felt ready to take on the day with confidence and poise. Arya walked out of her bedroom and found Alexander already dressed and waiting in the living room. He looked effortlessly handsome in a crisp shirt and tailored trousers, his presence commanding attention without even trying. Her heart skipped a beat as she took in his chiseled features and the way his shirt hugged his broad shoulders, sending a wave of warmth coursing through her. How could a man be so handsome and hot? The definition of handsome and hot was Alexander. It appeared she wasn't the only one captivated by his presence, as his eyes lingered on her with such intensity that it felt as if he was going to devour her. Alexander's eyes lit up as he caught sight of Arya approaching, his heart swelling with admiration at the sight of her. He couldn't help but notice how the floral dress accentuated her curves, enhancing her graceful movements with every step she took. The way the fabric draped over her frame only served to highlight her natural beauty, leaving him momentarily breathless. His gaze traced the contours of Arya's floral dress, a subtle smirk tugging at the corners of his lips as his admiration for her grew. "That dress suits you," he remarked, his voice low and husky, betraying the intensity of his thoughts. "It's intriguing." Arya's heart fluttered at Alexander's words, a warmth spreading through her chest at the unexpected compliment. It was a stark contrast to the criticisms and belittling remarks she had endured from Ryan in the past. Who would have thought such a simple line could nearly stop her heart? For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that she was worthy of such admiration. With a shy smile, she met Alexander's gaze, gratitude shining in her eyes. Arya offered a grateful smile in response to Alexander's compliment. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice tinged with sincerity. "You're welcome," Alexander replied with a smirk. "Let's go." They made their way to the garage, where Alexander's 3 luxury cars were parked side by side. One of the cars was a sleek black Audi A5, known for its elegant design and powerful performance, an Aston Martin Vantage F1 racer, and the other was a stylish silver Mercedes-Benz C-Class, chosen for its sophistication and comfort. After a brief moment of consideration, Alexander gestured towards the Mercedes-Benz C-Class. "Shall we take this one?" he asked, holding the door open for Arya with a gentlemanly smile. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the mall. As soon as Alexander pulled into the driveway, they stepped out of the car. When Jessica caught sight of Arya, her eyes lit up with excitement. "Well, well, well, look who's here," she exclaimed, grinning from ear to ear. Arya chuckled and replied, "Hey there, shopping buddy." "Hello, brother," Jessica teased, nudging Alexander playfully. Alexander rolled his eyes, but a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Don't start, Jess," he replied, shaking his head in mock exasperation. "Aw, look at you, all grown up and married now. How is married life treating you, big brother?" She playfully teased Alexander, then winked at Arya, adding, "Hope he's behaving himself, Arya." Alexander chuckled in response to Jessica's teasing remark before replying, "Oh, you know how it is, Jessica. Married life has its ups and downs, but I wouldn't trade it for anything," he said, then turned to Arya with a warm smile. "I'll leave you in good hands with Jessica, Arya. She'll take care of you," he assured her before adding, "and I'll make sure to compensate her for her efforts." Arya nodded in understanding and replied, "Thank you, Alexander. I'll be fine with Jessica." Then, with a playful tone, she added, "But I thought we were going to shop together. Are you sure you don't want to join us?" Although Arya didn't know where she got the courage to make a playful remark to Alexander, she liked it. Alexander chuckled softly and responded, "As much as I'd love to, I have some errands to run. But don't worry, Jessica will take good care of you. Besides, I trust her taste more than mine when it comes to shopping. He then winked at Jessica, acknowledging her expertise in fashion. Alexander chuckled softly and responded, As much as I'd love to, I have some errands to run. But don't worry, Jessica will take good care of you. Besides, I trust her taste more than mine when it comes to shopping. He then winked at Jessica, acknowledging her expertise in fashion. Jessica observed the interaction between Alexander and Arya, a warm smile gracing her lips. There was a sparkle of curiosity in her eyes as they exchanged words with ease. Something had shifted between them since their marriage just a few days ago. They appeared remarkably close, as if they had been together for years rather than mere days. Jessica couldn't help but feel a sense of happiness for her brother, seeing him so content and at ease in Arya's presence. It was a stark contrast to the strained relationships he had endured in the past. For the first time in a long while, Alexander seemed genuinely happy, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He appeared more relaxed and carefree, a far cry from the guarded demeanor he had worn before. It was clear to Jessica that Arya had brought out a side of her brother that she hadn't seen in years. Ever since his relationship with Elena, Alexander had seemed distant and detached, but now, with Arya by his side, he seemed more alive than ever. As her thoughts drifted back to the present moment, Jessica marveled at the transformation she witnessed in her brother. It was as if Arya had breathed new life into him, filling the void that had long lingered within his heart. With a soft sigh of contentment, Jessica turned her attention back to the couple before her heart filled with happiness for their newfound happiness. Whatever had transpired between them, she knew one thing for certain. Alexander and Arya were meant to be together. As Alexander prepared to leave, Jessica playfully urged him to go, her tone light-hearted and teasing. Go on, big brother, she said with a grin. I'll take good care of your lovely wife. Besides, I have so much to catch up on with Arya. We're going to have a fabulous time together. Alexander chuckled at his sister's playful remark, his eyes sparkling with amusement. I have no doubt you two will, he replied, casting a fond glance at Arya. Take care of her, Jess. And Arya, enjoy yourself. I'll see you both later. With those words, Alexander turned and walked back to his car. He ignited the engine and with a wave drove off down the driveway, leaving Arya and Jessica standing together outside the mall. Arya watched him leave with a lingering gaze, a mix of emotions swirling within her. She couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude towards Alexander for arranging this shopping trip. Yet there was also a hint of sadness at his departure. As she turned to Jessica, she noticed her sister-in-law watching her with a knowing smile, and she couldn't help but wonder what thoughts were running through her mind. Arya, I'm so glad you're here. Today's going to be so much fun. It's like a fresh start for both of us, isn't it? Let's make the most of it and find you some amazing outfits. And hey, if you need anything, just let me know. I've got your back, Jessica said, linking her arms with Arya's. As they walked into the shopping mall and headed towards the dress store on the second level, Arya's expression shifted, her knuckles clenching involuntarily. Inside the shop, a woman clad in a seductive dress was perusing the dresses on display. Arya's gaze fixed on her, a hint of tension creasing her brow. Noticing Arya's reaction, Jessica's concern piqued. Does she bother you? She asked, her voice laced with concern. Arya turned to face Jessica, her expression unreadable. What? You mean Nora? She responded, her tone guarded. Of course, Jessica replied, her gaze shifting to the woman in question. Jessica's eyebrows furrowed with concern as she observed Arya's reaction. Of course, she responded, her tone sympathetic yet probing. Arya's lips pressed into a thin line as she struggled to contain her emotions. It's just the memories, she admitted, her voice strained. I overheard her saying some awful things about me once. It's hard to forget. Jessica's expression softened with understanding as she placed a comforting hand on Arya's shoulder. I'm sorry you had to go through that, she said sincerely. But don't let her ruin your day. Let's focus on finding you some amazing outfits, okay? Arya nodded in gratitude, her tense muscles gradually relaxing as she forced herself to push aside the unpleasant memories. As Arya continued walking inside the store, Nora's mocking voice echoed behind her. Well, well, look who decided to grace us with her presence. Didn't realize they let gold diggers into high-end stores like this. Must be a new policy, she sneered, her words laced with contempt and superiority. It was Nora who had spoken. Arya ignored her, striding further into the store with elegant confidence, as if Nora's remarks were nothing but a passing breeze. Her composed demeanor only seemed to provoke Nora further, fueling her anger with every graceful step Arya took. Jessica frowned at the remark, but seeing Arya said nothing, she decided to remain quiet too. Such people aren't worth their time or words. Nora's anger flared, as Arya's dignified silence only seemed to fuel her frustration. How dare she ignore me? Nora growled in her thought. Oh, don't act all high and mighty just because you're married to some nobody, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. You think you've hit the jackpot marrying into a wealthy family, but let's face it, you're still nothing but a nobody without your precious Alexander. She raised her voice, loud enough to gain enough attention, which she did because other customers began watching what was going on. A few of them recognized Nora and some recognized Arya. Nora's words were meant to sting, a thinly veiled attempt to undermine Arya's confidence and assert her own superiority, but unknown to her it would fail because Arya has changed. Arya turned to face Nora, her expression calm, yet assertive. Nora, it's disappointing to see you resort to such petty insults, she remarked, her voice steady despite the underlying frustration. But then again, I shouldn't expect much from someone who thrives on tearing others down to feel better about themselves. Unlike you, I don't measure my worth by the size of my husband's bank account. Oh, do you even have a husband? Arya said, looking her up and down, then continued. Maybe one day you'll realize that true confidence doesn't come from belittling others, but from embracing who you are without needing to put others down, she said. Nora's face twisted in shock and anger as Arya's words hit her like a slap in the face. Her eyes widened and her mouth hung open in disbelief. She hadn't expected Arya to reply with such confidence and eloquence. For a moment, Nora was speechless, unable to come up with a comeback. Her mind raced, trying to process Arya's composed rebuttal. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find the right words to retaliate. Arya smirked gracefully, her gaze narrowing at Nora as she waited for her to say something. Looks like silence speaks louder than words, doesn't it? Arya said, her tone dripping with satisfaction and confidence as she delivered the final blow to Nora's pride. As Arya turned away, leaving Nora fuming in her wake, Nora's expression darkened into a scowl. Anger boiled within her, fueled by the humiliation of being put in her place by Arya. She blinked, coming to realize that all eyes were still on them. Does it mean the people present here had heard what Arya said to her? This is so embarrassing, she shrieked in her head. With a forced smile masking her inner turmoil, Nora vowed to herself that she would not let Arya get the best of her. Deep down, though, she couldn't shake the feeling of insecurity that Arya's words had stirred within her. Jessica crossed her arms and moved forward, stopping at Nora's front. Nora, your comments are unwelcome and inappropriate, she stated, her tone calm but resolute. I won't tolerate any disrespectful behavior towards our customers, particularly towards Arya, who is not only a valued patron, but also my sister-in-law. I must ask you to refrain from such remarks or leave the premises, Jessica warned Nora, making it clear that she wouldn't tolerate any disrespect towards Arya. She even dared to call my brother a nobody, Jessica scoffed in her thought. Guess I need to teach this thing a lesson. Nora's eyes widened in surprise as she caught sight of Jessica. She had been so consumed with the desire to belittle and insult Arya that she hadn't even noticed the elegant figure of Jessica standing nearby. Oh, Jessica, I didn't see you there. I'm so sorry for what happened, Nora apologized, her words rushed and stammered. Apologies won't undo the harm done, Nora, Jessica replied, her tone stern. But let this serve as a reminder to watch your words and treat others with the respect they deserve. Now I suggest you leave before you cause any further disturbance, she added, her voice conveying a clear message of disapproval. Nora's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as Jessica's words sank in. She nodded meekly, realizing the gravity of her actions. With a murmured apology, she turned on her heels and hurried out of the store, her head bowed in shame. Meanwhile, Jessica approached one of the store attendants with a composed yet authoritative demeanor. "Excuse me," she began, her voice carrying a hint of urgency. "Could you please inform the other shoppers that the store will be closing temporarily for a private event? We appreciate their understanding and cooperation." The attendant nodded in acknowledgement and quickly set about relaying the message to the other customers. Within minutes, the store began to empty out as the shoppers made their way to the exits, leaving Arya and Jessica alone to continue their shopping in peace. Arya's brow furrowed with confusion as she watched the other shoppers hurriedly exit the store. Turning to Jessica, who stood calmly beside her, she voiced her concern. "What is going on? Why is everyone suddenly leaving?" Arya asked, her tone tinged with worry. Jessica smiled knowingly at Arya's question before responding. "I thought we could use some privacy for our shopping spree, just the two of us. So, I asked the attendants to clear the store temporarily. Now, we have all the space and time to find you the perfect outfits without any distractions," she told Arya. Arya widened her eyes in shock, her thoughts raced with surprise and gratitude. She couldn't believe Jessica's thoughtful gesture, considering how chaotic the situation had been moments ago. For Arya, it was a moment of realization, a recognition of her newfound importance and the respect she commanded from those around her. It was a stark contrast to the days when she felt overlooked and undervalued. Arya's heart swelled with gratitude towards Jessica, her sister-in-law. In that moment, she felt a sense of belonging and significance that she had never experienced before. "Thank you, Jessica," Arya said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "I really appreciate this. It means a lot to me." Jessica returned Arya's smile. "It's nothing, Arya. I did it for my brother and because I like you," she replied. Arya's smile widened at Jessica's words, touched by her sincerity. However, a question lingered in her mind, one that she couldn't shake off. With a curious glint in her eyes, she turned to Jessica and asked, "You know, Jessica, there's something I've been meaning to ask you about Elena's relationship with Alexander. How well do they really know each other?" Arya's curiosity deepened as Jessica's smile faltered slightly at the mention of Elena's name. Sensing a shift in Jessica's demeanor, Arya pressed on with her inquiry. "Jessica, who exactly is Elena Sterling to Alexander?" Arya asked, her voice tinged with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Jessica's smile regained its composure, though a hint of uncertainty lingered in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment, weighing her words carefully before responding. "Elena Sterling. Well, she's someone from Alexander's past," Jessica replied carefully, choosing her words with caution. "They used to be close." Arya's eyes widened with surprise at Jessica's cryptic response. "Close? What do you mean?" she pressed, her curiosity piqued. Why does she feel there was more to their relationship than just being close? Jessica sighed softly, knowing that she couldn't keep Arya in the dark any longer. "Elena and Alexander had a relationship before he met you," she admitted reluctantly. "They were together for a while, but things didn't end well between them." Arya's heart sank at Jessica's revelation, a wave of unease washing over her. She had sensed a connection between Alexander and Elena, but she hadn't realized just how deep it ran, although she'd sensed the connection between them. "Does Alexander still have feelings for her?" Arya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jessica hesitated for a moment before responding, her expression somber. "I don't know, Arya, but what I do know is that you're Alexander's wife now, and nothing can change that," she said firmly, her gaze locking with Arya's. Arya couldn't help but frown. How was it fair that Alexander knew so much about her, yet she knew so little about him? It didn't seem right that he could keep secrets from her while expecting her to open up to him completely. The thought of Elena, someone as pretty as her, once being Alexander's woman, stirred an uncomfortable feeling in Arya. She tried to brush it off, but deep down, she couldn't deny the pang of insecurity it brought. But she quickly shook her head, scoffing at herself. No, she couldn't be jealous. After all, she was just getting to know Alexander, and whatever happened before they met shouldn't bother her. She tried to convince herself that it was just a passing thought, nothing more. Thank you for telling me, Jessica, Arya said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. I appreciate your honesty. Jessica smiled warmly at Arya's words, a sense of relief washing over her. She brought out some expensive and pretty shirts from the dressing store's hanger, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Of course, Arya. I believe in women supporting women, and you deserve to know the truth, she replied sincerely. And I want you to know that despite everything, Alexander has always been a good brother to me. He's been there for me when no one else was, especially during some difficult times. Arya listened intently, her curiosity piqued by Jessica's heartfelt words. You know what, Arya? When I found myself pregnant at a young age, facing judgment and criticism from everyone around me, it was Alexander who stood by me without hesitation, Jessica continued, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and admiration. While others turned their backs on me, Alexander and his mother were there for me, offering me their unwavering support and acceptance. Arya's eyes widened in surprise, a newfound respect blossoming within her heart as she listened to Jessica's story. She had never imagined the depth of Alexander's compassion and kindness, nor the extent of his loyalty to his family. Alexander's actions spoke volumes about the kind of person he is, Jessica went on, her voice steady with conviction. He's compassionate, understanding, and fiercely loyal to those he cares about. And I have no doubt that he will be the same for you, Arya. Arya's heart swelled with emotion as she absorbed Jessica's words. Despite the lingering doubts and uncertainties swirling in her mind, she couldn't deny the genuine affection and respect that Jessica held for Alexander. It was clear that he had left a lasting impact on her, shaping her perception of him in a profoundly positive way. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that, Arya said softly, reaching out to squeeze Jessica's hand in a gesture of support. But it sounds like you made the right decision in keeping your child. Mason is an adorable and lovable child. Jessica's eyes softened, touched by Arya's words of understanding and compassion. Thank you, Arya, she replied gratefully. And I know that Alexander will be there for you just like he was for me. He may have his flaws, but his heart is in the right place. With each revelation, Arya found herself seeing Alexander in a different way, feeling a rush of admiration for his strength and courage. She realized that beyond his cool demeanor, Alexander possessed a heart of gold, full of integrity and kindness. Her heart fluttered with a newfound appreciation for the man she had married, knowing that he was someone she could always rely on and trust. What do you think about this dress? Jessica asked, pulling out an elegantly inclined cream floral print wrap maxi dress and stylish floral print sleeveless. Arya's eyes lit up as she examined the dresses. Wow, they're gorgeous, she exclaimed, a bright smile spreading across her face. I know, right. Go try them on in the dressing room while I pick more dresses for you. When starting a job, the first thing you must do is make a good first impression on the people there, especially your coworkers, Jessica advised. Arya nodded enthusiastically. You're right. I'll try them on right away. As Arya disappeared into the dressing room to try on the dresses, Jessica busied herself selecting more outfits, her eyes scanning the racks for the perfect choices. Time flew by as Arya tried on various outfits, each one more stunning than the last. She couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation building within her as she imagined herself wearing these beautiful clothes. After what seemed like hours of trying on clothes, bags, shoes, and jewelry, Arya and Jessica finally finished their shopping spree. It had been an enjoyable day spent bonding with Jessica and exploring her sense of style. As they made their way towards the exit of the store, Arya's heart skipped a beat when she spotted Alexander standing at the entrance, holding a bouquet of red roses in his hands. His eyes lit up with delight as he caught sight of Arya, a warm smile spreading across his face. Arya felt a surge of happiness, something she hadn't felt before as she walked towards him. As Arya approached Alexander, she couldn't help but notice how his eyes sparkled with warmth and affection as he greeted her. "Hey, Arya," Alexander said, his voice soft and gentle. "I hope you had a good time shopping with Jessica." Arya smiled warmly, feeling a newfound sense of closeness with Alexander. "Yeah, it was great. Jessica helped me pick out some amazing outfits," she replied, her voice filled with enthusiasm. Alexander's gaze softened as he took in Arya's radiant smile. "I'm glad to hear that." "You look beautiful," he said sincerely, his words sending a flutter of excitement through Arya's heart. "Thank you," Arya replied, her cheeks flushing with a faint blush. "And these roses are lovely. Did you get them for me?" Arya's mind raced with a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment at her assumption. She scolded herself internally, chiding her for jumping to conclusions so quickly. Why had she automatically assumed the roses were for her? What would make Alexander get her roses, especially after their rocky start? Alexander nodded, a tender smile playing on his lips. "I did. I thought they would brighten up your day," he said, his eyes never leaving Arya's. Arya's heart fluttered with a mix of surprise and disbelief. Could it be true? Were the roses actually meant for her? Alexander's expression softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his usual tough demeanor. His gaze held hers with unwavering sincerity as he confirmed her suspicions. "These roses are for you," he admitted, his voice laced with genuine contrition. "I'm sorry for leaving you alone on the first day of our marriage and for being rude to you." As Alexander spoke, Arya's heart skipped a beat, her eyes widening in disbelief at his unexpected gesture. He had apologized to her before, but now he was apologizing again with flowers. Her expression softened, a mixture of surprise and gratitude washing over her features. "Thank you, Alexander," she replied softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I appreciate your apology, even if you have apologized before," she said, reaching out to take the bouquet from him. As their fingers brushed against each other, Arya felt a spark of electricity pass between them, igniting a warmth that spread through her entire being. The passers-by, oblivious to the intimate exchange unfolding before them, continued on their way, but Jessica couldn't help but smile warmly at the scene before her. It was clear that Alexander's gesture had touched Arya deeply, and she couldn't have been happier for Arya. With a warm smile, she turned to her Arya. "Isn't this wonderful?" Jessica exclaimed, her eyes shining with delight. "Alexander is really making an effort, and you seem so happy." Arya flushed, unsure of what to say. "Thank you for today, Jess. I can see you took care of my wife very well," Alexander said with a smile. "No problem. I did what I could." Jessica replied, "I had a nice day today because of Arya." Meanwhile, the security guards who had been holding on to the bags of clothes, shoes, designer bags, and jewelry began to load everything into Alexander's car. Despite the limited space in the trunk, they managed to fit everything in, ensuring that nothing was left behind. As they finished loading the last of the bags, Jessica turned to Arya with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about the rest of the items, Arya. The company will deliver them to Alexander's apartment," she explained, her voice filled with reassurance. Arya nodded gratefully, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She couldn't wait to see her new purchases in their new home, a tangible reminder of the wonderful day she had spent with Jessica. With everything sorted, Arya and Alexander bid farewell to Jessica and drove off. In Johnson's family mansion, at night, with a deliberate sip of water, David cleared his throat, capturing the attention of Isabella and Grace. "I have made a decision," David declared, his tone carrying a sense of authority that brooked no argument. "And it's regarding you, Isabella." He directed his gaze towards his eldest daughter. Isabella looked up from her meal, curious. She gave her father an innocent smile. She wondered what her father's decision could possibly entail. Could it be a significant promotion within Johnson Financial Group? Perhaps even the rights to the company itself? "What is it, Dad?" she inquired, her voice laced with anticipation. David nodded, his features betraying no hint of hesitation. "I want you to resign," he stated plainly, his words hanging heavily in the air. Isabella's initial shock was palpable. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why would her father ask her to resign from her position in their family's company? What was his motive behind such a demand? Grace, seated beside Isabella, exchanged a concerned glance with Isabella, her thoughts mirroring Isabella's confusion. Why would he suddenly say that? What has gotten into him? Grace wondered silently. "You don't mean it, right, Dad?" Isabella questioned, hoping against hope that her father's words were merely a jest. But David's stern expression confirmed the seriousness of his intent. "I mean it. I want you to go and work at LH Star," he reiterated, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Isabella scoffed, her disbelief evident in her tone. "Why would I leave my position in our company to go for?" she began, but David cut her off with a stern interruption. "Let me finish," David interjected firmly. "I'm not just sending you to work there. You're going as a spy. Your task is to uncover the identity of LH Star's CEO and gather any incriminating evidence you can find. Once you've accomplished that, I'll ensure you're rewarded with an even greater position within Johnson Financial Group." "But failure is not an option," he concluded, his words carrying a veiled threat. Isabella's eyes widened in astonishment, her brows furrowing into a frown. "I can't, Father. I like the idea of being the manager of our company," she protested. David's tone turned stern, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Do not disobey me, Isabella. You've never disobeyed me before, so don't let this be the first time because I won't like it," he warned, his words laced with authority. Grace smiled awkwardly, attempting to tread lightly as she broached the delicate subject. "Dee, darling, don't you think you should send one of your investigators to do the job?" "What do you think?" she suggested tentatively, hoping to offer an alternative without offending David, though she realized she might have unintentionally done so. David's expression hardened as he turned to glare at Grace. "Are you implying that I've made the wrong choice in who to use or not to use?" he retorted sharply, his tone tinged with irritation. He then redirected his gaze towards Isabella, the intensity of his stare softening slightly. "You have to listen to me, my angel. It's for our own benefit. Someone above me in this hierarchy had ordered it. There's an empty position waiting for you at LH Star," he explained cryptically. Isabella pondered her father's proposition deeply, weighing the potential advantages against the risks. While she saw the opportunity to gain even more of her father's favor and her own interests, she couldn't shake her concern about Ryan's position at LH Star. If she uncovered incriminating evidence, it could jeopardize his job. Well, not as if she cares. Her thoughts drifted to the mysterious figure who had ordered this operation, wondering if it was a member of the influential Harrington family. At the thought of that, a sly smile crept onto Isabella's lips as she made her decision. "I have decided, Dad. I will take the position. I will get you what you want," she declared confidently, her resolve unwavering. "When should I start?" Alexander was in his home office, which was spacious and elegantly furnished with a large desk, comfortable chairs, and bookshelves lining the walls. The room offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, providing a backdrop of urban sophistication. Alexander was seated behind his desk, exuding an air of authority as he dialed Richard's phone number. Richard answered the call promptly, his voice filled with a hint of trepidation. "Good evening, boss," Richard said, unsure of how Alexander would react to his previous slip-up. "I apologize for my mistake at your wedding. It was a momentary lapse in judgment. I assure you it won't happen again." Alexander nodded, acknowledging Richard's apology with a calm demeanor. "I appreciate your recognition of the error. However, that's not why I called you," he said, getting straight to the point. Richard braced himself, ready to address whatever issue Alexander had called about. "Understood, sir." "How can I assist you?" he asks. "I have 2 reasons for calling you. Firstly, I've been analyzing the recent market trends and have some strategic initiatives in mind that could capitalize on the emerging opportunities. I believe we can position ourselves to gain a competitive edge," Alexander explained, subtly showcasing his astute business acumen. Richard listened attentively, impressed by Alexander's forward-thinking approach. "That sounds promising, sir. I'll be eager to hear more about your ideas," he responded, genuinely intrigued. This was one of the reasons Richard enjoyed working with Alexander. Not only was he mysterious, he was also strategic and professional when it came to work. What Richard doesn't understand is why Alexander won't reveal his real identity to the world. Why was Alexander hiding his true self under the facade of being a playboy and rebellious? Excellent. Now, on to the main subject, Alexander continued, shifting the conversation to the matter at hand. Richard's curiosity was piqued as he awaited Alexander's next words. "Regarding my wife, Arya," Alexander began, his tone becoming more serious. "She'll be coming to you for a job interview at the company. I trust you'll handle her application with the utmost professionalism." Richard's surprise was evident in his voice as he processed this unexpected information. "Of course, sir. I'll ensure she receives the proper consideration for the position," he assured Alexander. "Good. Treat her well and offer her the job if she's the right fit," Alexander instructs, emphasizing the importance of fairness and meritocracy. Richard nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Understood, sir. I'll make sure she's given every opportunity to showcase her qualifications," he replied, determined to carry out Alexander's orders effectively. Alexander's protective instincts suddenly kicked in as he considered his wife's well-being in the corporate world. He took a moment to think about it. "Richard, it's imperative that Arya's connection to me remains confidential," Alexander asserted, his voice carrying a hint of caution. "No one apart from you should be aware of her status as my wife. It's crucial to preserve the integrity of her application process and ensure that she's evaluated based on her merits alone," he said. Richard nodded, understanding the gravity of Alexander's words. "Of course, sir. I'll make sure your wife's identity remains confidential, just as I've made yours," Richard replied on the other end of the call. Alexander continued, his voice carrying a note of warning. "And let me be clear. Any mistreatment or discrimination towards Arya will not be tolerated. She deserves the same opportunities and respect as any other employee, regardless of her relationship to me." Richard nodded again, his commitment to ensuring Arya's well-being unwavering. "Understood, sir. I'll make sure she's treated fairly and given every chance to succeed," he reassured, determined to uphold the principles of fairness and equality within the company. After a moment of silence following their discussion, Richard broached another topic, his tone carrying a note of seriousness. "Boss, there's something else I need to inform you about," Richard began cautiously. "Mr. Johnson has made a rather unusual request regarding his daughter, Isabella," he announced. Alexander's interest was piqued at the mention of David's name, his brow furrowing slightly in anticipation of what Richard was about to reveal. "He's asked for Isabella to be considered for a position at LH Star," Richard continued, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "It seems he's keen on her joining the company." After absorbing Richard's unexpected news about David's request regarding Isabella, Alexander fell silent, his mind whirling with suspicion and concern. The idea of Isabella, a manager in her family's company, seeking employment at LH Star strikes him as odd and raises questions about the underlying motives behind David's request. Something doesn't seem right, Alexander thought to himself, his brow furrowing with unease. The notion of Isabella potentially accepting a lower-ranking position at LH Star when she held a prominent role in her father's company doesn't add up, leading Alexander to question David's intentions. "Give her the job, but make sure she is qualified for it," Alexander stated firmly after a moment of contemplation, his voice carrying a weight of finality. "Yes, boss," Richard responded obediently, acknowledging Alexander's decision. With a decisive nod, Alexander ended the call, his expression hardening as he processed the implications of his decision. A few hours later, in the stillness of the night, around 2 a.m., Arya woke up feeling thirsty. She grumbled as she dragged herself out of bed, rubbing the sleep from her eyes as she shuffled towards the kitchen, her bare feet patting softly against the floor. As she entered the dimly lit kitchen, she walked forward, her steps hesitant in the darkness. Suddenly, she collided with something solid, the impact jolting her senses. With a startled gasp, she stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest as she braced for the fall. But before she could hit the ground, strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her close and steadying her. Arya's breath caught in her throat as she realized she was not alone. She tensed for a moment, uncertainty coursing through her veins, before she relaxed into the reassuring embrace. Her initial panic faded as she felt the warmth of the arms around her, a sense of security washing over her. With a grateful sigh, she leaned into the embrace, her body melting against the comforting strength of the unknown presence. Arya's senses were heightened by the unexpected encounter. "Oh," she gasped softly, her voice barely a whisper as she tried to regain her composure. Feeling the solid warmth of the person's body against hers, Arya's hands instinctively reached out, seeking reassurance in the darkness. With a gentle touch, her palm came to rest on his chest, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of his breath beneath her fingertips. Subconsciously, she marveled at the strength and solidity she found there, her fingers tracing the contours of his arms with a mixture of curiosity and fascination. In the darkness, Arya's gaze flickered up to meet the figure's eyes, searching for recognition or confirmation of his identity. Was this Alexander, her husband?